Hello and welcome to Robinson Hall Experts Talk. My name's Laura Saunders and I'm Marketing PR Manager at Robinson Hall. Today I have Charles Lovell. Charles is the Head of Auction Department. Charles started working in the property industry in the mid-90s. He has worked at Robinson Hall for 12 years and has been instrumental in building the auction department into one of the most successful regional auction houses in the country. I also have David Jones. David Jones is the auctioneer. You may have seen him on the rostrum. David has 4 decades worth of experience. He is found on the rostrum at every auction, rapidly concluding each sale. Welcome, David and Charles.
Hello there. Yeah, thanks.
We are going to be talking about the results of the last auction. So we had an auction on the 16th of October. How did it go?
Very well. Yeah. We had a really good sale. It was our largest sale ever in terms of capital value. So we sold over £6 million worth of property.
Wow.
Yeah, really pleased. So we've never been over the £6 million mark. So it's another landmark for us, another step forward.
Yeah.
And I'll just add that the room was full. The sale room was full. There were probably 200 people there. I think we found through this year that the number of people attending the auctions has gone up and up and up. And I know a lot of our competitors still are not back in a live sale room. They insist on selling everything on the live stream, but I think they're missing a trick. Buyers and sellers both love being in the room. It's a good atmosphere, and it keeps everybody honest.
I saw some photos actually. It looked like you had a full house.
We did, really full. And also, before the auction, out in the foyer, we had a few displays. We had Howdens come along. They've been coming this year. We've had a couple of auction finance companies come along as well. And there was a real buzz. There's a lot of activity going on.
Great. So it was your largest yet. How is the market?
I think it's delicate to a degree. I think the auction market, it's an environment in which sellers can provide confidence to buyers because of that transparency. I think the private treaty market is perhaps a little bit more delicate and people sitting on their hands. But no, for us, we saw some positive results, some really strong sales.
And I think a lot of interest in properties that need a bit of work doing to them. A project, I think there's lots of people looking for that. Investment properties need to be well priced. There's still plenty of investors about, but it's got to be priced properly. And sales of little bits of land went very well as usual through the auction. They always seem to attract good interest.
So you touched on properties that need work, investment and land. Are there any other types of properties that sell well or particularly well at our auctions?
I'm not going to claim that the perfect condition house that's going to be bought by somebody who's selling their house and in a chain works well at auction. It's not really the ideal property for us. We're looking for properties where either value can be added, they make a good rental, or alternatively those properties that are very hard to value. If you've got a little brick building in a field, how do you put a value on that? Well, you put it into an auction. If you've got a public toilet in Luton, how do you put a value on that? It goes into auction and then it will find its mark.
So I guess it's properties that are slightly niche, unique, not ones that you'd see in a stereotypical estate agent. Yeah, quirky.
Anything quirky, anything out of the ordinary, or something where value can be added, and that can be various ways. It might just be a refurbishment. It might be improving, gaining some planning consent. It might be subdivision. Anything like that.
Okay. Do you have any predictions for 2025 and what the market might do?
I think that interest rates are probably going to improve. I think that will help the private treaty market and give people a degree of confidence.
Yeah.
So I think that will certainly happen. I think for us, we will continue with strong demand, for those type of properties we just mentioned.
Okay. So in addition to getting instructions from sellers, we also work very closely with estate agents. And I do actually have one to introduce very shortly. What service do we provide with working with estate agents?
We really provide them an auctioneer as an auctioneer service. So, a partner agent will refer a property to us. We treat that as their client to a degree. We undertake the role of auctioneering, and then afterwards, the partner agent will be credited with the sale, because effectively they've asked us to step in and provide them that specific service.
Yeah, we work with a large number of partner agents, and there are certain properties that perhaps they struggle with. Firstly, that there might be properties that just don't fall into their usual ambit. They're a residential agent and a commercial property comes along. What do they do with it? Perhaps it's easier to send it to auction. And also there are properties that maybe have been stuck on their books for a while. It might be a structural problem or something wrong with the title. They've had various sales fall through, and again, it's perhaps more appropriate to consider auction. And so we provide that service for them. Obviously, we share fees, and hopefully we provide them with a good service.
So if I'm an estate agent and I get a good auction property on my books, as in one that you've described as being one that sells well, what advice would you give me?
I think the important thing is that an agent doesn't try and wear the two hats. There's an estate agency hat and there's an auctioneer's hat, and sometimes we get estate agents that try and talk about auction to the client, and that's not really the best situation. It's far better for that agent just to say to a client, look, I think auction could suit you quite well here. I'm going to get Charles or whoever to speak to you about that, and just leave it to us, and then we can talk through the whole process with the client. We can go out, look at the property, meet the client, and discuss whether it's right for them or not. And then there's a sort of a natural process that we go through in order to try and list the property at the right price, and also fees to a degree don't then seem to become an issue at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good to know. So now I'd like to introduce Russell Beard, who is joining the podcast, and he'll be talking about what it's like to be a partner agent with Robinson Hall Auctions. Welcome, Russell. Russell Beard is the director at Cooper Beard. He boasts 44 years of experience in property and auction. After completing school, he began his career with Peacock's Auctioneers in Bedfordshire, which you may have all heard of. At the young age of 21, he established his own agency, Cooper Beard. Cooper Beard have offices in Bedford and Rushden, and they focus on the sale of residential properties. In addition, Russell owns another business that specialises in promoting development land and properties through the planning system on behalf of owners. He's also a private landlord and a partner in a small home building venture. Welcome, Russell.
Good morning. Depending what time you're listening to this podcast.
How long have you worked with Robinson Hall Auctions?
Well, Charles just blown the dust off his diary and reliably informs me it's 2012, I think.
2012,
wow.
we first had a conversation. I sold the very first property for you in our February 2013 sale. And I always remember it because it was on the corner of Green Lane and the High Street in Clapham.
Yeah.
And you'd had a fall through on it because of a bad survey. And we put that into the sale and we sold it for slightly more money than the previously agreed price.
A better memory than I have, I've got to say that.
Well, it was a real feather in my cap to get to work for you. You're a company with a very good reputation. And I really wanted that when we were setting out on our quest to attract agents. I wanted to attract agents that had good reputations.
Yeah, I think that's probably key, isn't it? Why did you decide to become a partner agent?
I think obviously there was a recession post 2008, and there suddenly seemed to be an influx of companies trying to get into the property auction sector through franchise arrangements or whatever that may be. And as a single agent, you it's impossible to do it on your own, pretty
Yeah.
much. You can't get enough stock. So we decided that we wanted to hook up with a specialist property auction house. And as you already alluded to, I've been in business a long time, and I've
Yeah.
known Robinson Hall all of that period. And we wanted someone local, but above all else, someone who knows what they're doing, professionally very capable, reputationally outstanding, and it was a perfect fit with Robinson Hall.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, that's very kind.
What are the benefits of being a partner agent?
It gives you some more to your armoury than you would otherwise not have. So when you're pitching for a job with a client or even an existing retained client, there's obviously various things you can do: private treaty, tender, a raft of methods of selling property. But I think to have the auction ability within your armoury is essential. And depending on the client's requirements, nature of the property, etc., which you already alluded to, that just gives you the edge over maybe some of our competitors who don't have that facility or the knowledge of how a property auction works.
And what sort of situations have you put properties to us?
Well, Charles used the word quirky earlier on. I think
Yeah.
that sums it up quite neatly.
Yeah.
For us, for want of a better expression, a normal property, a standard estate house, is probably not going to be the best
No.
way, unless the client simply says, I need the cash quickly, we need to get dispose of this rapidly. Then auction's great for that.
Yeah.
But we go down the quirky route, which is an endless list of building plots, opportunities, structural problems, sitting tenants. You can go on and on with all the various types of property that fit the bill. But anything a bit beyond the normal, something that's really hard to value, something that's very hard to finance, where when you go to auction and buy a property, you've got to have the cash funds or finances in place on the day to
Yeah.
exchange contracts when that gavel goes down. So it's very hard to buttonhole a particular type, but anything non-conventional.
Okay. And how do you find the process of being a partner agent?
It's great. Probably something we'll come on to in a moment, but one of the hard pieces for an agent to understand is you're going to hand over your client to someone else, which is a ridiculous situation in almost any other circumstance.
Yeah.
So you discuss with the client, an option here is for possibly going to auction. And at that point in time, you give them a reasonably good indication of how that process is going to work. Then you hand over to Charles and the team at Robinson Hall, and then they'll pick up from there. And sometimes it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the client, or they're not prepared to accept the reserve, whatever it may be. And then it comes back again, and we go down another route. But fundamentally, it's as simple as we get Charles and the team here to contact the client, give them their advice, their recommendations, and then hopefully, obviously, a sale ensues from there.
I think that one of the things that we can bring and add value is that those ones that don't work, we often introduce a degree of market reality to that seller.
Yeah.
So even where we have a conversation, it doesn't come to us, we're handing it back to Russell and his team, and that client then is probably much more aware of the need to adjust their figure, and so Cooper Beard end up with a price reduction that sits the property more correctly within the marketplace and enables them then to conclude with a private treaty sale.
Okay. And I think it's probably important, just based on that, to have a look at some of our auction results as well, because I think with any property there's a guide price, but you can see looking at the auction results that we often exceed the guide price and go over that, but the guide price is really designed to get interest.
It is. It's a starting point. It's there
Yeah.
to create a level of competition.
Yeah.
And that competition in turn provides the confidence, and that, I always say, is the key word to any market. When we're in a market where the news bulletins are telling us that house prices are going up £10 a minute, then everybody's naturally got confidence. But in a market where there's more caution, concerns about the economy, political landscape, whatever it may be, if you set a property into the market with an attractive price and people see others interested, that confidence is immediately produced.
And that's what we preempt with our clients, and we say to them that before, just so you know in advance, Charles is going to say to you almost certainly a figure that's a lot lower than you're perhaps expecting, and you have to have that come and buy me. You've got to be really brave as a vendor. So it's a made up number. Something's worth 200,000. You're going to have to perhaps go to the market with a reserve of 150, 160. You'll be really brave. Then that attracts the interest.
Yeah.
And it leads on from there. But you've got to be really brave as a vendor, and that's something you're very good at, to be fair to you, Charles.
Well,
You've got to tell them that, you've just got to be ballsy, for want of a better word.
Well, and also I think, to be fair, the partner agent has to have a little bit of courage to approach their client, and I think perhaps you might say that the first property that you put to us, you probably had more nerves than you have today.
Absolutely, and you see something and crikey, they're going to give that away. Well, touch wood, it's never happened yet, but it's just that courage and confidence in the auction process, where if something's going into the marketplace at something around open market value or the perceived open market value, then maybe the attraction's not there. Then David will work his magic on the rostrum and squeeze the pips.
I'll do my best, but for any partner or agents thinking of joining up with us, I think that first one is very important and could be a concern. And I'd certainly encourage them to come along and see a couple of auctions and see how it works and gain a bit of confidence, or speak to somebody like Russell about his experience with us.
Yeah.
Just touching on that, Russell, do you have any examples of lots you've referred that have sold well at auction?
Yes, I mean, auction is one of the... I love auctions, let's backtrack slightly, and they're fascinating environments to work in. We've done dozens now with Robinson Hall, but it's one that stands out, and I'll be very careful what I say because ultimately someone bought this. But there was we were acting for an estate. Someone had passed away sadly, and there was a Victorian terraced house in Bedford, and we put the property on the market at 200,000, private treaty sale, normal sale, and we found a buyer at whatever 185, something like that, and it fell through on survey, and this house was wobbling, I think is a non-technical expression.
Okay.
Go back to the market, and the price, to try and cut a long story short, keeps nibbling down, 2, 3, 4 abortive sales, and then the client came onto the phone, the executive for the estate said, look, I need to get rid of this property, this is just getting silly now. Mm-hmm. We said, right, auction, that's the answer. It's a very finite time. You'll get the gavel will go down, it's going to be sold. And I think if I recall correctly, bearing in mind we started life at 200,000, I think Charles put it on with a guide of 130 and the reserve was about 140, something like that. I know for a fact if someone had waltzed into our office a few weeks before the auction, brandishing cash at 150, they'd have got a deal. So it goes into the auction and it made 220.
Wow.
And it's one of those scratch your head moments. You think, well, how on earth that happened? Because there was, to state the obvious, there were 2 people bidding. The reserve was knocked out really early on in the process. So 2 people have run it up to 220. They could have bought it much more competitively. And I think it's the magic of the room. And they go along, I'm going to buy that property. And you get pulled into purchasing. So that's one that stands out for me. But famous last words, we've never had a bad result yet, which is going to guarantee we get one next time. But it's always worked with us.
Yeah.
And I know their hit rate, in a lot of these property auction houses, their hit rate of sales is probably 50-60%. Well, the boys will tell you themselves. Now their success rate, and sometimes post sales also, you can agree a deal after the auction, but their success rate is phenomenal and one of the best in the country.
Yeah, we typically expect to get 85 or even 90%
We do.
sold, and the ones that don't sell is where we haven't quite persuaded the seller to come in at a competitive enough price.
Yeah.
But I'm delighted to hear that success story, and
That was great. Yes.
Yeah, I remember the house. Yeah.
Do you often find that you are putting or referring instructions that you have tried to sell yourself, or now that you've been working with us for quite a long period of time, has your confidence grown where you know what is a good auction property and therefore you will refer it straight away?
Yeah, there's yes to both questions, I guess. There's certain times you go out and you think this has got auction written all over it.
Yeah.
Don't do anything else. Put this in the room, get Charles round there, and we're off. And yes, some sadly, as with the story, are a result of perhaps failure. We've got it wrong. We've gone down the private treaty route. It's not worked out. There's clearly a problem with this property. We need to really get this thing sold now.
Yeah.
And through the most efficient manner, which is always auction, not involved in chains and nonsense and mortgage offers.
Quick sales.
It's a quick sale.
Yeah.
It's done.
That's good to hear. So what advice would you give to other estate agents who might be listening?
I think that, as David's already asked, I would gladly speak to anyone if they're interested in doing it as an
Thank you.
impartial observer. Respectfully, you've got to understand what a property auction means and have confidence. As I said earlier, you're going to give your client's name and number to another company.
Yeah.
Robinson Hall will not do anything other than look after you. So have confidence in the process, have confidence in Robinson Hall to act in their best interest, the client's best interest, and you can recommend with absolute confidence that'll work out. They're not going to try and cross-sell anything. So, for instance, if there's a building plot and someone buys a plot to build the house, it's a resale, they're not going to go for that. They're not going to do anything that you would not want a rival to do. But go and watch an auction, speak to the team at Robinson Hall, and just learn the process and learn how it works. And they're great fun. And from an agent's point of view, to be brutally honest, you don't do a great deal.
No.
You hand the job over.
Yeah.
You can still get your Rightmove posting. So there's an obsession with the numbers. You can still show it as sold by your agency. You're not missing out on anything here.
No.
Someone is going to do most of the work for you. The fees are good. And it's a lovely, slick, smooth process from the moment we've had situations where we phoned Charles up and we've received commission payments within less than 2 months.
Wow.
And you don't have to wait for completion for your payment either.
Yeah.
So from a purely financial point of view, it's great.
And I think the other thing that is a big consideration, and Russell has touched on this about you handing over a client, a lot of agents are concerned, well, what if that client's got more stock? And what we first discussed this with a housing association, Jepson's, when they were in existence, and we sold 2 for you, one in Ashburnham Road and the other on Conduit Road. And I said to Russell, if you introduce that seller to us, then anything else that they come to us with, if they come directly to us, you will be marked as the introducer. So we will share commission with you on that basis. So we try and look at it from our partner agent's point of view as to, well, what would they consider to be fair, and we always try and play fair with them.
I mean, an example of that earlier this year, there was a property, I think again, my memory's not my strong point, but we recommended the property over to you a couple of years ago, and you sold it, and through unfortunate circumstances, the property's then resold again, so they went directly to Robinson Hall. We weren't involved in that part. Got a phone call from Charles, just so you know, this property's going back into the auction, and we'll honour your introduction, we got some commission.
Great.
Well,
yeah.
Not being funny, it's not many people would do that.
No, they wouldn't. No, so very transparent.
But it leaves the door open for it's this lovely relationship.
Yeah.
Crikey, if you're working with a firm who are that honest, you're not going to go anywhere else in a hurry.
No, but I think that's the key, isn't it? We're partners at the end of the day. We're not trying to tread on anyone's toes. We're transparent. We want to keep the relationship going. We want you to refer more lots to us.
Worth pointing out that we don't have an estate agency of our own, so we're not in direct competition with Russell or any of our other partner agents. We're not looking to put them into our own estate agency system. If we can't sell it by auction, we pass it straight back to the partner agent.
And the only thing which gives you a slight conundrum, and this is happening again, they play it absolutely straight. Someone may have 3 agents go out to see the property. Agent 1 phones Charles up immediately. Agent 2, which could be me, phones Charles up. He'll straight away say, look, I'm telling you now, I'm really sorry, but you're second. The first agent gets the deal, gets the commission, which is fair enough, and you do lose a couple on that basis, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
But it's a straight operation.
I guess the more you work with us, the more you realise what a good auction property is, and then hopefully you'll be first. But I guess there's always a little bit of competition to be had with some of the partner agents that we work with.
And as Russell said, we have occasion. We use a system called Refit. That has a protected field that can't be changed, and whenever we take a telephone call from partner agent, we put that property into Refit and we put in the protected box who it was from, and that might be there for years. We often sell property that we first had to call for 3 years ago, and it works in that agent's favour insofar that they get a phone call, we finally got this property in, because we'll keep plugging away with that seller, You know, they might decide that auction's not right for them today, and they try another agent and perhaps a third agent, and then eventually, you know, we get the instruction and we're going to an agent saying, well, that referral you gave us 3 years ago, we've just got that into the auction.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it works well.
Great. Well, that's all good to hear. Is there anything else to add before we conclude?
I would just like to say thank you to Russell for
Thank
working
you,
with us,
Russell.
and thank you to all our other partner agents who might be listening. We our business relies on our partner agents, and we have to have that two-way conversation with them at all times.
And I think going back to another point that we made, they are partners. We do treat them as partners, and because it's so important to us to have that good relationship, we don't. There's no contract to being a partner agent. You know, we work on the basis that if we put our foot out of line, that agent wouldn't come to us again. So you know, we always try to honour and respect the terms that we state we'll work under.
Great. That's good to hear. Russell, do you have anything else to add?
I think one of the, apart from the things you mentioned already, another thing is with the sales, they're local. So
Yeah.
you get some big London auction houses where they have hundreds and hundreds of lots scattered all over Britain. This is really provincial. This is very local. So your buyers are going to come from this area. So it's very targeted, very focused. And it's worked. We had a great relationship. It's friendships through this as well. It's a lovely working relationship, and I'd recommend it to anyone considering expanding their agency into property auctions.
Thank you, and thank you for your time today. Very much appreciated. If you are a partner agent and you'd like more information, please get in touch. As Russell has said, he's more than happy to speak to you. We've also got a team at Robinson Hall Auctions. The contact details can be found on our website. We have lots of information to provide to you, but we can also come and meet you, have a chat. As we've already mentioned, feel free to come to our next auction. We've got one in December.
4th of December.
4th of December, Delta Marriott, Milton Keynes
Used to be the
Hotel.
Hilton. It's near the Open University for those familiar with Milton Keynes.
So it usually starts at 12. We do recommend you get there in advance because we try and start at 12 on the dot. So to fully get the atmosphere of the room, have a chat with our staff prior to the auction, we'd recommend that you get there probably half an hour before. But yeah, come and experience it, see what it's like for yourself, get a feel for the types of properties that sell well, and we're more than happy to speak to you. And obviously, if you are a seller listening, give us a call. We are still taking lots for our next auction. Thank you ever so much for your time today, and I have recorded lots of podcasts and I hope to record many more, so stay tuned and hopefully I will see you again next time. Thank you, goodbye. Our podcasts are for informational purposes only and should not be considered as legal advice. We are not responsible for any losses, damages or liabilities that may arise. The advice and views are from the expert only.